The champagne flute felt fragile in my calloused hands as I watched my wife Amelia glide through her birthday party like she owned the world. Maybe she did. At least, she owned this crowd of pretentious assholes sipping overpriced wine in our backyard, talking about art installations and sustainable design like they were curing cancer. "Nick, darling, come meet everyone." Amelia's voice carried that fake sweetness she'd perfected since her interior design firm started making real money. The kind of sweetness that meant I was about to be humiliated in front of her new friends. I forced a smile and walked over, my work boots feeling clunky against the stone patio I'd installed myself last summer. The group fell silent as I approached, 5 perfectly groomed people in clothes that cost more than my monthly salary at the construction company. "This is my husband, Nick," Amelia announced, her hand barely touching my arm. "He's in construction." The way she said it made it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. A tall guy with perfectly styled hair and a watch that probably cost more than my truck extended his hand. "Jason Whitmore. I run a tech startup downtown. Amelia's told us so much about you." I shook his hand, noting his soft palm and weak grip. "All good things, I hope." "Of course." Amelia laughed, but her eyes were cold. "Though I was just telling everyone about my ex-boyfriend Marcus. Remember him, Nick? The one who really set the standard for what a successful man looks like." The group chuckled politely. My jaw tightened, but I kept smiling. "Marcus just bought that new penthouse on Elm Street," continued Sienna, Amelia's best friend and partner at the design firm. She was a sharp-faced woman who always looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. "The one with the rooftop pool." Amelia designed the interior, of course. "Stunning work," Jason added, his eyes lingering on my wife a little too long. "You have such incredible taste, Amelia." "Well," Amelia raised her glass, "I suppose I should thank Marcus for setting such high standards. And I suppose Nick deserves thanks too for trying." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I'd learned long ago not to show weakness to predators. Instead, I smiled wider. "You're absolutely right, honey. I should definitely try harder to meet your standards." I raised my beer bottle in a mock toast. "Here's to standards. May we all get exactly what we deserve." Something flickered in Amelia's eyes, uncertainty, maybe even fear. Good. She should be afraid. The party continued around us, but I spent the rest of the evening watching. Really watching. The way Jason's hand lingered on Amelia's lower back when he thought no one was looking. The way she laughed at his jokes, the real laugh, not the fake one she used with me anymore. The way Sienna kept glancing between them with a knowing smirk. By the time the last guest left, I knew what I was dealing with. The only question was what I planned to do about it. "Great party," I said as Amelia kicked off her heels in our bedroom. "Your friend Jason seems nice." "He is nice, and successful, and cultured." She didn't look at me as she spoke, focusing instead on removing her jewelry. "The kind of man who appreciates fine things." "Unlike me, you mean?" She finally turned, her expression cold. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." I sat on the edge of the bed, studying her face. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long have you been fucking him?" Her face went white, then red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I stood up, moving toward the door. "I'm sleeping in the garage tonight. Wouldn't want to lower your standards by sharing a bed." I spent that night in my man cave, surrounded by my tools and my restored 1967 Camaro. This was my space, the one place in the house that was still mine. As I nursed a beer and stared at the ceiling, I thought about Amelia's words. She wanted standards? Fine. I'd show her what real standards looked like. The next morning I started paying attention. Really paying attention. 3 days later, I found the phone. It was wedged between the couch cushions in our living room, a cheap burner phone that definitely wasn't mine. Amelia was at work, or at least that's where she claimed to be spending her increasingly long days. I powered it on, and my world exploded. The text messages were explicit, graphic, and signed with a J that could only be Jason. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. Room 237 at the Marriott. -J -. Last night was incredible. Nick has no idea what he's missing. He's such a loser. You deserve so much better. J. Soon, baby. Soon I'll be free of him. A. I scrolled through weeks of messages, each one a knife in my gut. They'd been meeting at hotels, at his penthouse, even in our house when I was at work. They laughed about me, called me names, planned their future together while I paid the mortgage on the house where they were screwing. The last message was from yesterday. Can't wait to celebrate your birthday properly tonight. Same room. J. So that's where she'd been after her own party. While I was cleaning up the mess in our backyard, she was in bed with Jason Whitmore, probably telling him all about how she'd humiliated me in front of everyone. I sat in my garage for an hour, staring at that phone. Part of me wanted to storm into her office and throw it in her face. Part of me wanted to drive to Jason's startup and beat the smug look off his pretty face. But I'd learned something important over the years. The best revenge is served cold and with careful planning. I photographed every message, every photo they'd sent each other, every hotel receipt. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to work like nothing had happened. That evening, Amelia came home late again. Sorry, honey. Big project deadline. She kissed my cheek, and I could smell another man's cologne on her skin. No problem. I made dinner. I'd actually ordered pizza, but she didn't need to know that. How's the new client working out? Jason, right? She tensed slightly. He's demanding. Very particular about what he wants. I bet he is. I handed her a plate, watching her face carefully. Must be nice, working with someone who appreciates quality. Yes, well, he understands the finer things in life. She took a bite, not meeting my eyes. Unlike some people. There it was again. The casual cruelty that had become her signature move. A year ago, it would have hurt. Now it just made me angry. Speaking of fine things, I said, I was thinking we should do something special this weekend. Maybe get a hotel room downtown. The Marriott has nice suites, I hear. She choked on her wine. The Marriott? Yeah, room service, fancy sheets, the works. Unless you've got other plans? No other plans. But her hands were shaking as she set down her glass. I just think we should save money right now. My business expenses have been higher than usual. I bet they had. All those hotel rooms weren't cheap. Of course. You're right, as always. I smiled at her, the same smile I'd given her at the party. We should definitely stick to our standards. That night, she claimed she had a headache and went to bed early. I waited until I heard her snoring, then crept back to the living room. The burner phone was gone. Message received, Amelia. Game on. The next day, I took a long lunch break and drove to Jason's office building downtown. It was one of those glass towers full of startups and venture capital firms, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive sneakers and called each other disruptors. I found his company on the directory, Whitmore Innovations, 15th floor. I didn't go up. Instead, I waited in the parking garage until he came down for lunch. He drove a white Tesla Model S, because of course he did. I followed him to an upscale gym across town, the kind with juice bars and personal trainers who cost more per hour than I made in a day. But here's the thing about expensive gyms. They all have the same equipment as the regular ones. And Jason Whitmore, for all his money and success, had clearly never been in a real fight in his life. I signed up for a day pass and changed into my workout clothes. By the time I made it to the boxing area, Jason was already there, working the heavy bag with form that would have made my old coach laugh. His punches were weak, his stance was wrong, and he had no idea how to protect himself. Perfect. Nice form, I said, approaching the bag next to his. You train here often?" He looked up, recognizing me immediately. His face went pale, but he tried to play it cool. "Sometimes. Good stress relief, you know?" Oh, I know all about stress relief. I started hitting my bag, each punch landing with a solid thud that echoed through the gym. "I'm Nick, by the way, Amelia's husband." "Right, yes. From the party." He'd stopped punching entirely now, just standing there with his gloves hanging at his sides. "Small world, isn't it?" I landed a particularly hard combination, making my bag swing violently. "You know, Amelia's been working late a lot recently. She says you're a very demanding client. I just know what I want." "I bet you do." I stopped hitting the bag and turned to face him fully. "Want to spar?" "I could use a partner." "Oh, I don't think—" "Come on, just light contact, unless you're worried about messing up that pretty face." The challenge hung in the air between us. He could have walked away, should have walked away, but his pride wouldn't let him back down in front of the other guys in the gym. "Sure," he said, trying to sound confident. "Why not?" We moved to the ring, and I helped him with his headgear like we were old friends. The other gym members gathered around, sensing blood in the water. They didn't know the details, but they could feel the tension. "Remember," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "just light contact. We're both gentlemen here." The first round was almost embarrassing. Jason telegraphed every punch, dropped his guard constantly, and had no footwork to speak of. I could have knocked him out in the first 30 seconds, but that wasn't the point. Instead, I played with him, landing light jabs to his face and body, making him look foolish without really hurting him. "You're pretty good at this," he gasped during a break, sweat pouring down his face. I had a good teacher. My old man taught me that if you're going to take something that belongs to another man, you better be ready to fight for it. I smiled at him through my mouth guard. "You ready to fight, Jason?" His eyes went wide. He knew that I knew. The second round was different. I stopped playing games and started showing him what real violence looked like. Nothing illegal, nothing that would get me in trouble, just good, clean boxing that left him gasping on the canvas while the other gym members cheered. When it was over, I helped him to his feet and pulled him close, like I was checking if he was okay. "Next time," I whispered in his ear, "I won't be wearing gloves." I left him there, humiliated and bleeding from his nose, while I headed to the showers. One of the other guys had filmed the whole thing on his phone. By evening, it would be all over social media. That night, Amelia got a text from an unknown number, just a link to the video with no message. She watched it 3 times before deleting it, her face getting paler each time. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked from my chair, not looking up from my newspaper. "Fine," she said, but her voice cracked slightly. Everything's fine. But we both knew it wasn't. The war had begun, and I'd just fired the first shot. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I played the perfect husband, making breakfast, asking about her day, even bringing her flowers just because. The more loving I acted, the more paranoid she became. "You're being weird," she said one evening, watching me load the dishwasher. "Weird how?" "Nice. You're being too nice." I laughed, kissing her forehead. "Can't a man appreciate his wife?" "You're always saying I don't try hard enough." She didn't have an answer for that. Meanwhile, I was gathering intelligence. I followed her to lunch with Sienna, sitting 3 tables away and watching them whisper like conspirators. I tracked Jason's movements, learning his routines, his weaknesses, his pressure points, and slowly, carefully, I began to plant seeds of doubt in their perfect little world. It started small. An anonymous email to Jason's business partners, asking if they knew about his extracurricular activities with married clients. A casual comment to Mrs. Delaney, our gossipy neighbor, about how successful Amelia's business had become and how she'd been working such long hours with that handsome young client. "Oh my," Mrs. Delaney had said, her eyes lighting up with scandal. "Well, I suppose that explains all the late nights. Within a week, half the neighborhood was talking about Amelia's special client relationship. The whispers followed her to the grocery store, the gym, even to church on Sunday. People are saying things, she told me one night, pacing our bedroom like a caged animal. What kind of things? About me and Jason. About us working together. Well, you do work together. A lot. Late into the night sometimes. I shrugged, playing innocent. People talk. You know how it is. It's not like that. Of course not. Why would anyone think it was? She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign that I knew the truth. But I'd had years of practice hiding my feelings from her. She saw nothing but concerned confusion. The real fun started when I began targeting their social circle. These weren't my friends, they'd made that clear at the birthday party. But they were Amelia's new crowd, the people she was trying so hard to impress. And like all social climbers, they were vicious when they smelled weakness. I started with Rebecca, the wife of one of Jason's investors. A casual conversation at the coffee shop, just a concerned husband worried about his wife's reputation. I'm sure it's nothing, I told her, stirring my coffee thoughtfully. But people are starting to talk about Amelia and her client. You know how these things can spiral out of control. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with malicious interest. What kind of talk? Oh, you know. Late nights, expensive hotels charged to the business account, that sort of thing. I'm sure it's all perfectly innocent. But in this climate, with all the harassment scandals, I let the sentence hang. Of course. These things can be so damaging even when they're completely innocent. Exactly. I just hope Jason knows what he's doing. His reputation is so important to his business. By the end of the week, 3 of Jason's investors had called informal meetings to discuss his professional conduct. His secretary started giving him worried looks every time Amelia called. And the whisper network that had once celebrated their affair was now turning it into a liability. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The real masterstroke came when I discovered Sienna's secret. It took some digging, a few conversations with people who'd worked at the design firm, some careful social media stalking, and one very productive lunch with a disgruntled former employee named Tracy. Oh, Sienna's a piece of work, Tracy told me over sandwiches. Always thought she was better than everyone else. The way she talked about you behind your back was just cruel. What did she say? Called you Amelia's charity case. Said she couldn't understand why someone with Amelia's potential would settle for a construction worker. Tracy shook her head. But the funny thing is, she tried to hit on you at the Christmas party 2 years ago, right? When Amelia was in the bathroom? I remembered. Sienna, drunk on champagne and jealousy, pressing herself against me in the hallway and whispering about how she could show me what a real woman was like. I'd pushed her away and never told Amelia, thinking it would just cause drama. She was pretty embarrassed when you rejected her, Tracy continued. Spent the rest of the party making jokes about your clothes and your truck. Classic mean girl behavior. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was what Tracy told me next. You know she's been skimming from the business account, right? Small amounts, but it adds up. She thinks Amelia doesn't notice, but the bookkeeper mentioned it to me before I left. Said she was waiting for the right time to bring it up. Suddenly, everything made sense. Sienna wasn't just Amelia's friend and accomplice. She was playing her own game, using the affair as a distraction while she embezzled from the company they'd built together. And if I played this right, I could use that information to destroy them all. That evening, I made a phone call. Sienna? It's Nick. Listen, I know this is awkward, but I need to talk to you about Amelia. There was a long pause. What about her? I think she's having an affair. Another pause, longer this time. Nick, I know you're her friend, and you probably think you need to protect her, but I have proof. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts, the whole thing. I don't know what to say. Meet me tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main Street, noon. We need to talk. She agreed, probably thinking she could manage the situation, keep me from doing anything too destructive to her meal ticket. She had no idea that I already knew everything, that I was 3 moves ahead of her in a game she didn't even realize we were playing. The next day, I watched her squirm as I laid out everything I knew about the affair. Her face went through a range of emotions: surprise, concern, calculation. She was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to protect Amelia while also protecting herself. "I had no idea," she lied smoothly. "I mean, I knew they worked closely together, but I never suspected—" "Of course not. You're a good friend." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But here's the thing, Sienna. I'm not going to just sit back and let this happen. I'm going to destroy both of them. Professionally, socially, financially. Unless what? Unless someone who cares about Amelia helps me find a better way. Someone who has access to information I might need. Someone who could help me understand exactly how deep this goes." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning. She was weighing her options, trying to figure out which side was more likely to win. What kind of information? Financial records from the business, client lists, email correspondence, the kind of things that might show a pattern of inappropriate behavior. I couldn't possibly. Of course not. That would be wrong. I smiled at her, the same cold smile I'd been practicing. But if someone happened to leave certain documents where they might be found, well, that would just be carelessness, wouldn't it? She agreed to think about it. I knew she would. Because Sienna was a survivor, and survivors always bet on the winning horse. That night, Amelia came home from another late meeting and found me waiting in the kitchen with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "What's all this?" she asked, suspicious. "I thought we should talk. About us, about where we're going." She sat down across from me, accepting the wine, but not drinking it. "Okay. I know things have been difficult lately. I know I'm not the man you thought you were marrying." I took a sip of wine, choosing my words carefully. "But I want you to know that I love you, and I'm willing to fight for our marriage." "Nick, let me finish. I know there are other men out there who can give you things I can't. Money, status, the kind of life you deserve. But I can give you something they can't." "What's that?" I looked directly into her eyes, letting her see the truth there for just a moment. "Consequences." She went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean that actions have consequences. And choices have prices, and sooner or later, everyone pays what they owe." I finished my wine and stood up, leaving her sitting there with fear creeping across her face. "Think about it," I said, heading for the garage. "Think about what you really want, and what you're willing to pay for it." The game was accelerating now, moving toward its inevitable conclusion. Soon, very soon, it would be time for the final moves. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. The documents appeared in my mailbox 3 days later, just as I knew they would. Sienna had made her choice, betting that I was more dangerous than Amelia was valuable. Smart woman. The financial records told a story that was even better than I'd hoped. Not only was Sienna embezzling money, but Amelia had been charging personal expenses to the business account for months. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, even lingerie purchases, all disguised as client entertainment and business development. But the real gold mine was the email correspondence. Months of messages between Amelia, Jason, and Sienna, planning their little affair like it was a military operation. They'd laughed about me, called me names that would have gotten them fired from any decent company, and plotted ways to get me out of the picture permanently. "Maybe we should just tell him," Jason had written in one email. "Put him out of his misery." "No," Amelia had replied. "He'd take half of everything in the divorce. Better to wait until the business is more established. Then I can afford to lose him." "Or we could make him leave on his own," Sienna had suggested. "Make his life so miserable he just gives up and walks away." They'd tried, too. The constant criticism, the public humiliation, the gradual isolation from friends and family. It was a coordinated campaign designed to break me down, make me believe I was worthless, convince me to disappear quietly so they could continue their perfect little life without any messy complications. Too bad for them, I wasn't the kind of man who disappeared quietly. I spent the weekend making copies of everything, organizing it into a neat little package of evidence that would destroy all three of them. Then I began phase 2 of my plan. It started Monday morning with an anonymous email to the State Business Licensing Board, complete with copies of the fraudulent expense reports and evidence of embezzlement. By noon, Amelia's phone was ringing with calls from investigators wanting to schedule interviews. "I don't understand," she told me that evening, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "Someone reported us for financial irregularities. They have copies of our internal documents." "That's terrible. Who would do such a thing?" "I don't know, but when I find out..." She trailed off, probably realizing how that sounded. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. You run an honest business." She looked at me sharply, searching for sarcasm, but I kept my expression neutral. The beauty of telling the truth was that it was so much easier than lying. Tuesday brought phase 2. Social media. I'd created several fake accounts over the past few weeks, building up credible histories and friend networks. Now I put them to work, spreading carefully crafted rumors through the design community's online forums. "Has anyone else heard about the Whitmore Chen design scandal?" I posted on a popular industry group. "Word is, there's some serious financial misconduct happening there." "I heard it involves the owner having an affair with a client," someone else replied, another one of my fake accounts, of course. "That's so unprofessional." I would never hire them after hearing this. Within hours, the rumors were spreading organically. Real people were sharing the gossip, adding their own speculation, creating a wildfire of scandal that consumed everything in its path. Amelia's business phone stopped ringing with new clients and started ringing with existing clients asking uncomfortable questions. Wednesday was Jason's turn. I'd discovered that his startup was in the middle of a crucial funding round, trying to raise $10 million from a group of conservative investors who cared deeply about corporate culture and ethical leadership. A few well-placed anonymous tips about his relationship with a married client, complete with photographic evidence, were enough to make those investors very nervous. "They're asking questions about my personal life," he told Amelia during a phone call I was listening to from the garage. I'd bugged her car the week before, a little electronic device that cost me $50 online and gave me access to every conversation she had while driving. "What kind of questions?" "About us. About whether I'm involved with married clients. They're worried about liability issues." "Just deny it. There's no proof." "There are photos, Amelia. Someone sent them pictures of us together." "What kind of pictures?" "Us kissing outside the hotel. Us holding hands at that restaurant downtown. Someone's been following us." I smiled, remembering the pleasant afternoons I'd spent with my telephoto lens, playing private investigator. It had been easier than I'd expected. They were so arrogant, so sure they were untouchable, that they'd never bothered to be careful. Thursday brought the first real consequences. Jason's investors pulled out of the funding round, citing concerns about management judgment and potential legal exposure. His startup, which had been valued at $50 million the week before, was suddenly worthless. Amelia's business license was suspended pending investigation of the financial irregularities. The state had frozen her business accounts, leaving her unable to pay rent on the office or salaries for her employees. And Sienna? Sienna got arrested Thursday afternoon for embezzlement, based on an anonymous tip that led investigators directly to her personal bank accounts and the evidence of her crimes. "I think someone's targeting us," Amelia said that evening, staring at her laptop screen in disbelief. "This can't all be coincidence. Who would do that?" "I don't know, but whoever it is, they're destroying everything I've worked for." I put my hand on her shoulder, feeling her flinch at my touch. Maybe it's karma. What? Karma. You know, what goes around comes around. Maybe the universe is just balancing the scales. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the suspicion growing in her eyes. But suspicion wasn't proof, and proof was something she'd never find. I'm going to fight this, she said finally. I'm going to find out who's behind it and make them pay. I'm sure you will, honey. You're a fighter. But we both knew she was already beaten. The game was almost over, and there was only one move left to make. Friday night, I made the call I'd been planning for weeks. Ben? It's Nick. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm ready to collect. Ben Rodriguez was my oldest friend, an ex-cop who'd retired early and bought a cabin up in the mountains. He also happened to be one of the few people who knew the real me. The man I'd been before I met Amelia, before I'd tried to become someone I wasn't. What do you need? A place to have a conversation. Somewhere private, where we won't be interrupted. How private are we talking? Very private. And Ben, bring your camera. I have a feeling we're going to want to document this conversation. Saturday morning, I sent 3 text messages from Amelia's phone while she was in the shower. The first went to Jason. Emergency. Meet me at Ben's cabin. Address attached. Come alone. The second went to Sienna, who was out on bail. I know what you did. We need to talk. Cabin address attached. The third went to Marcus, Amelia's ex-boyfriend. Nick knows everything. He's planning something terrible. Please help me. Then I deleted the messages from her phone and waited for the fun to begin. We need to go for a drive, I told Amelia after breakfast. Where? Somewhere we can talk. Really talk. About our future. She looked nervous, but she got in the car. She didn't have much choice. Her license was suspended, her business was destroyed, and her friends were either in jail or avoiding her calls. The drive to Ben's cabin took 2 hours, winding through mountain roads that got more isolated with every mile. Amelia spent most of the trip on her phone, trying to manage the crisis that was consuming her life. The lawyers say it could take months to resolve the licensing issue, she told me, ending another call. And the business account is still frozen. I don't know how I'm going to pay for legal fees. Maybe Jason can help. He's got money. Had money. His company collapsed yesterday. The investors pulled out completely. I tried to look sympathetic. That's rough. What about Sienna? Sienna's facing federal charges. Her lawyer says she could go to prison for 5 years. Wow, it's like everything's falling apart at once. She gave me a sharp look. Yes, it is. We pulled up to Ben's cabin just as Jason's Tesla was coming up the other direction. Perfect timing. Sienna's car was already there, and I could see Marcus's BMW parked behind the trees. What's going on? Amelia asked, seeing the other vehicles. I thought it was time we all had an honest conversation. The look of fear that crossed her face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this moment. Nick, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking it's time for the truth. All of it. I got out of the car and walked toward the cabin, knowing she had no choice but to follow. Behind us, Jason was getting out of his Tesla, looking confused and nervous. The final act was about to begin. Ben's cabin sat on a small lake surrounded by pine trees, isolated enough that screams wouldn't carry to the nearest neighbor. Not that I was planning to make anyone scream, at least not physically. Nick, what the hell is going on? Jason demanded as we all converged on the front porch. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his expensive clothes wrinkled. Just a little gathering of friends, I said, pulling out the key Ben had given me. Thought it was time we all got to know each other better. Sienna emerged from her car, looking pale and frightened. The arrest had shaken her more than she'd expected, and the reality of prison time was starting to sink in. This is insane, Amelia said, but she followed me inside anyway. They all did. Curiosity, fear, and desperation make powerful motivators. The cabin's main room was rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and large windows overlooking the lake. Ben had set up his video equipment exactly as I'd asked, hidden cameras that would capture everything from multiple angles. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs arranged in a circle. "Make yourselves comfortable." "I'm not sitting anywhere until you tell me what this is about," Jason said, trying to sound authoritative. "It's about truth, Jason. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you on your perfectly sculpted ass." Marcus chose that moment to make his entrance, bursting through the door like he was staging a rescue. "Amelia, are you okay? I got your message." He stopped short when he saw the rest of us, confusion replacing heroic determination. "Marcus?" Amelia stared at her ex-boyfriend. "What are you doing here?" "You texted me," said Nick had found out about everything. That he was planning something terrible. "I didn't text you." All eyes turned to me. I smiled and pulled out Amelia's phone, which I'd pickpocketed during the drive. Actually, she did. Or rather, I did, using her phone. Just like I've been doing a lot of things lately. The silence that followed was beautiful. 5 people, all realizing at the same time that they'd been played by someone they'd underestimated. "You son of a bitch," Jason whispered. Now. Language. We're all adults here." I moved to the center of the circle, enjoying the way they all leaned away from me. Well, most of us are adults. Some of us are just spoiled children who've never faced consequences for their actions. "What do you want?" Sienna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want what I've always wanted. Respect. Honesty. And failing that, I want revenge." I walked over to a laptop Ben had set up on the coffee table and opened it, revealing a slideshow I'd prepared for this moment. "Let me tell you a story," I began, clicking to the first slide. It was a photo of Amelia and me on our wedding day, both of us young and happy and full of hope. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he'd found true love. He worked hard, saved money, and built a life with a woman who promised to love him for better or worse. Click. The next slide showed our house, the one I'd renovated with my own hands. He bought her a house, fixed it up, made it beautiful. He supported her dreams, encouraged her business, even when it meant long hours and financial stress. Click. Photos of Amelia's birthday party, including several shots of her humiliating me in front of her friends. But the woman had different dreams. She wanted more than love. She wanted status, wealth, the kind of life she thought she deserved. And she was willing to betray everything to get it. The next series of slides were the text messages between Amelia and Jason, blown up large enough for everyone to read. Marcus gasped when he saw them. Even Sienna looked shocked at how explicit they were. She started an affair with a client, thinking she was clever, thinking her husband was too stupid to notice. She laughed about him with her friends, planned to divorce him once she'd secured her financial future. Click. The financial records showing the embezzlement and fraud. But she wasn't the only one with secrets. Her best friend was stealing from their business, skimming money for her own purposes, and her lover was more interested in the thrill of taking another man's wife than in actually building a life with her. Jason's face was bright red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I clicked to the next slide, which showed email correspondence between Jason and 2 other women. "Tell me, Amelia, did you know that Jason was also sleeping with Rebecca Morrison and Sarah Chen? Or that he's been promising all 3 of you that you're the one?" Amelia turned to stare at Jason, who couldn't meet her eyes. "Is that true?" "It's not what you think. It's exactly what she thinks," I interrupted. "You're a predator, Jason. You target married women because they're vulnerable, because they want something their husbands can't give them. But you never had any intention of leaving your bachelor lifestyle behind." The room erupted in angry voices, Amelia screaming at Jason, Sienna trying to defend herself, Marcus demanding to know why he'd been dragged into this mess. I let them fight for a few minutes, enjoying the chaos I'd created. "Enough!" I shouted, and they all fell silent. "We're not done yet." I clicked to the final slide, which showed bank account balances, legal documents, and a timeline of events. "Here's what's going to happen. Amelia, your business is finished. The state investigation will find evidence of fraud, tax evasion, and misuse of funds. You'll lose your license, pay substantial fines, and spend the next few years rebuilding your reputation, if you can." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "Sienna, you're going to prison. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your plea bargain options are limited. 5 years minimum, probably more." Sienna started crying, the reality of her situation finally hitting home. "Jason, your startup is dead, your investors are gone, and word of your behavior is spreading through the tech community. You'll be lucky to get a job managing a McDonald's, let alone running another company." "You can't do this," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I already have done it. Everything I've told you has already happened. Your lives, as you knew them, are over." I closed the laptop and looked around the circle of defeated faces. "But I'm not completely heartless. I'm going to give you each a choice." "What kind of choice?" Marcus asked. He was the only one who still looked confused rather than terrified. "You can walk away. Right now. Get in your cars, drive back to your lives, and pretend this never happened. Accept the consequences of your actions and try to rebuild. Or," Amelia whispered, "or you can stay and fight. Try to convince the world that I'm the villain in this story. Tell everyone how the poor, stupid construction worker destroyed your perfect lives out of jealousy and spite." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Of course, if you choose to fight, I'll have to release the rest of the evidence. The videos, the audio recordings, the financial documents that show exactly how deep your corruption goes. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you really are." The silence stretched out, broken only by Sienna's quiet sobbing. "There's a third option," I continued. "You can give me what I really want." "What's that?" Amelia asked. "An apology, a real one. Not for getting caught, not for the consequences, but for what you did. For the betrayal, the lies, the cruelty. Admit what you are, and maybe, I'll let you walk away with some shred of dignity intact." Another long silence. Then Marcus stood up. "This is insane. I don't know what's wrong with all of you, but I'm not part of it." He headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at Amelia. "You used to be better than this. I don't know what happened to you, but it's not my problem anymore." The door slammed behind him, leaving 4 of us in the cabin. Sienna was the next to break. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for everything. The money, the lies, the things I said about you. I was jealous and stupid, and I ruined everything." "Why were you jealous?" "Because you loved her. Really loved her. And she had everything I wanted. The business, the house, a man who would do anything for her. And she threw it all away. I hated her for that. I hated both of you." It wasn't the apology I'd expected, but it was honest. I nodded to her. "You can go. Don't contact me or Amelia again, ever." She fled without another word, leaving just the 3 of us. Jason tried to salvage some dignity. "Look, Nick, I know you're angry, but nothing. You're a coward and a predator, and the only reason I'm not beating you to death right now is that you're not worth going to prison for." He left too, practically running to his Tesla. Finally, it was just Amelia and me, alone in the cabin where our marriage had come to die. "Well?" I asked. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her situation hit her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for all of it. For the affair, for the lies, for the way I treated you. You deserved better. Yes, I did. I don't know why I did it. I don't know what's wrong with me. You wanted more. There's nothing wrong with wanting more. But there's everything wrong with the way you went about getting it. She nodded, unable to speak. Our marriage is over, I said. You know that, right? Yes. I've already filed for divorce. No fault, clean split. You can keep the business, what's left of it. I'll keep the house and my retirement account. We'll both walk away and start over. What about the evidence? The videos and recordings? I considered the question. Part of me wanted to destroy her completely, to make sure she never forgot the price of betrayal. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. As long as you don't try to fight the divorce or cause me any more trouble, the evidence stays private. But if you ever come after me, ever try to hurt me again, I'll burn your life to the ground. Understood? Understood. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Amelia, I really did love you. I would have given you anything, been anything you needed. All you had to do was ask. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I left her there in the cabin, crying over the ruins of the life she'd thrown away. Ben was waiting outside, having watched the whole thing through his hidden cameras. Feel better? He asked. Actually, yeah, I do. Good. Because that was some cold-blooded revenge, my friend. Remind me never to cross you. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Don't worry. I only go to this much trouble for people I love. We drove back to town in comfortable silence, leaving Amelia to find her own way home. By the time I got back to my house now, she'd already been there and taken her things. She left the keys on the kitchen counter, along with a note. Thank you for not destroying me completely. I'll try to be better. I crumpled up the note and threw it away. Then I opened a beer, sat in my garage, and looked at my restored Camaro. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding my life, figure out what came next. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the silence and the peace that came with justice served. The standard had been set, all right. And for once, I was the one who'd met it.